Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any grand lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. Let's see, to interact with us, love seeing you live every Thursday night on Facebook and YouTube. So hello for those of you watching live. If not, catch the chat replays or listen in your favorite podcast app. You know me, my name is John RUARK, and I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And next up for his introduction, another Virginian, Joe Martinez. Hey, Joe.
Am I really a Virginian, or am I more a worldly
A world traveler? No.
traveling man?
No.
Hi. Hi, YouTube land, Facebook world. Joe Martinez, that's my name. I am still Worshipful Master of Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia, and a bunch of other lodges, and super jazzed to be here. There's one of my dogs. She is not a Mason, but, you know, it's open to the public and on the level. So, yeah, right on.
So she's allowed.
She's allowed to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Also, for his introduction, Robert Johnson. Hey, Robert. What's going on?
Hello. Not much. Just fresh back from the Valley of Chicago. Yeah, past Master Waukegan 78, current sitting secretary at Space Novum 1183, and the host of the Whence Came You Masonic podcast. So good to be with you guys,
Sweet.
talking about some sweet stuff.
Sweet stuff. Just the way I like it.
Hot
Very
stuff.
cool. How was presentation at
Valley.
Scottish Rite?
Well, you know, so it was going to be good. I'm sure it was amazing. I did that thing where, like, I didn't RSVP, but I just showed up because I was like, oh, you're going to have the meeting. I don't really want to eat the food, so I'm not going to pay, and I'm not going to RSVP. So I just went, but they were like, oh, you still got to pay because they're holding it in one of the rooms. So I paid them $25. I went in there, and it was like assigned seating because it was like a big, huge table lodge thing, and I didn't know that. And so I delivered a cake for Scott. So happy birthday, Scott Duvall.
Yay.
Happy birthday!
And then so I delivered the cake. I left it at the bar, and then I split. So I assumed Scott's education went great. I just didn't feel like putting anybody out by making them add like a chair somewhere. So yeah, it is what it is. But I know it was going to be good. I know he'd been prepping for it. So
As a firm believer in the RSVP system, you know that I give you zero sympathy.
oh yeah,
I
do-
actually invite Robert to all of my crap. He gets 2 evites a month. And
At least
he
2 invites.
RSVPs no. He RSVPs
And I
no.
always-
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the invite. Can't make it because I live in Illinois. So,
yeah.
but I'm a firm
I love
believer.
RSVP.
It's more than 2 because those evites are quite the nag, which is a good thing because I forget. So I'm just saying. Well, it's not you because you send 2, but it sends like, hey, as a reminder, you haven't let Joe know yet. Did I tell you haven't let Joe know yet? By the way, Joe doesn't know yet, so I get quite a few. Let's just say it's anything but persistent. Awesome. Well, hey, want to give a special shout out to all the patrons who support the show. You guys are awesome and rock my socks. If you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable. That's the URL, so you can chip in a few bucks and help us keep the show going for many, many years to come. Today's tarot card of the week will be drawn by Joe Martinez. So let's...
I can shuffle them, yeah.
That's the worst part about these like huge-handed tarot decks.
Yeah, so, speaking of huge tarot decks.
The
So we're
Masonic
going to be
tarot.
using the Masonic
Yeah.
Tarot, by
Yeah.
Patricio
Yes.
Diaz Silva, who's from Chile, which is where my mom's family's from, which is super awesome.
Nice.
These are actually really cool cards.
I like it.
I was trying to look before the show to see if he was actually a Freemason, but all the little booklet says is that he studied Masonic symbolism. So I don't know if he's a brother. Right on, hermano. How are you? But yeah, we don't know.
If not, he
But
did his
Lotto-
homework.
He did. He knows most than
Y'all ever get like
25%
that,
of the people in my area.
the giant, like the standard quote unquote deck? It's hold on. Look at this thing.
Nope, gotta go find this
Pay
thing.
no attention to the mess in my room. I'm in the middle of.
Oh, dude, that is my OCD is
Mess.
exploding right now at the mess on your couch. What is going on back
I'll
there?
cut over
Yeah.
to Joe.
No, go back to it. Go back to it. Let's stare and point
Look
at
at
it.
that. Look at that mess.
No.
Oh, my
Joe,
face.
It's all because my wife got me an awesome lamp that I tried to hang up and it wasn't working out. So
This really makes for entertaining.
I cannot stop staring at that chair. It's freaking me out right now inside.
enjoy it.
Dying.
Enjoy
I'm
it.
dying.
This
so
is
much.
this
I just want to get on a plane and clean that room. I'm so dying right now.
I'm
going
sure
to
it's
Angie's,
I'm sure it's a
hang
beautiful
out.
deck.
There's
Let's
gonna-
Hey Joe,
there's
why
a-
don't we
There's a maid. There's a maid that's going to show up at your house at 2 a.m. Like, Mr. Joe.
special
you paid me
delivery.
to clean. So yeah. While
Hey Joe,
we're-
why don't we actually get right to the
Let's pull the
tarot
card.
deck? Yeah.
Yes. All right. So here we go. Ready? Shablam.
Boom.
That
we got?
is the Queen of Chalices. So that's the Queen of Cups in this. You can see some Masonic symbolism there.
Queen of Cups.
Queen of Cups or Chalices.
That's some
So we've got
that's some sweet
feel-
feminine.
Some feeling, some caring. We've got emotional stability, which is 0 of us.
Yes.
Hey, what is the does every card have the square at the bottom? I'm just curious. Like that?
No. So the Major Arcana has the square and compass.
Okay.
Okay.
And let's see, wait. And then let's see what the knave, mallets. The queens have the square.
Okay.
The knights and the knaves just have their names.
I wonder with that deck if Silva decided that because the queens are a feminine aspect to put the square there in that inverted way to kind of represent a masculine balance.
So the king has
but
the square on there as well.
Oh, it also has the same orientation.
maybe not.
Yeah, look at
The
that.
king and the queen
Yeah,
do,
well, cool.
yeah. Yeah, and the rest have names. Yeah,
Wow.
but yeah. Queen of Chalices.
Queen of Cups. So I like the Queen of Cups because it's kind of your emotionally stable mother figure, right? That's it's the feminine side, but one who can control her emotions, right? The matron of the family, right? So think of that, wise old grandma who keeps the whole family in line. Like that's the kind of archetype of what's going on right now. So think about what would old grandma say about the situation that got going on. That, oh dear, don't worry, it'll be fine. Everything's great. Or
There's so there was a great article published a few years ago, and I think I may have mentioned it to you at some point in one of our mini chats. But there's this idea that these Fortune 500, Fortune 50s, they rise, everything's going amazing. Then they hit a huge roadblock, like let's say HP back in the day. And what do? Right? They pull a Queen of Cups because what they're doing is they go out and they hire the CEO. The new CEO is a woman, and they do this. We see it a lot in the business world. These companies go far, then they hit a wall and they don't know what to do. And when I was listening to, I want to say, Hidden Brain on
good
NPR,
podcast.
they were talking about it, and they said, really, it's the equivalent of all of the companies who do this. They don't know what to do, and mom, and that's what they do. And literally, that's what happens. The feminine force comes in, the woman CEO comes in, and kind of fixes all the problems, hangs around for 5-6 years, and then she goes to the board of directors, and then they get a new guy in there. It's really weird, but it seems to be a pattern, and I think that's interesting that the way you described that just now, kind of like what would mom do kind of thing. That's how you could think about that. Never be afraid to ask your maternal figures for advice, for sure.
Right. That's an interesting takeaway. You were going to show some of the cards that you have too, the little deck.
Oh,
Did you find it?
So I couldn't find it.
Or do we want
couldn't
another
find the
shot of
tarot
your
deck.
office?
Why don't you go look on that chair?
Oh, here it is.
It's probably... Oh, gosh.
There it is. Oh!
I have over 100 tarot decks.
This makes for
I
great
want to
TV.
set that chair and everything in it on fire. Oh my God!
Wisdom runes. I don't know. So this is the Oracle deck. It's an Oracle deck, but sometimes the cards are like huge,
Yeah.
right? Like that's my hand.
It's a big card.
Yeah.
for
So
people that wear
you got the
bifocals.
werewolf. You got the werewolf.
What the hell is it? What color is that?
Anyway,
I don't like it.
moving on. We've
Talk about
Moving on.
stuff.
we've got
We
the
lost
Queen
like
cards.
all the viewers. They're
Yes.
gone.
I don't blame them. Okay, here we go. Tonight's topic is on brother Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So this is interesting. In fact, the idea from the topic of this episode came from actually my very first Masonic paper that I wrote. This is for like the Beehive Club. We did an episode on the Beehive Club many years ago, and at the time, my lodge had a little study group, and they said pick a paper and write about it. So, not only did I pick, Brother Mozart and his kind of Masonic background, but specifically I dove deep, and we'll talk a little bit about his Masonic play or opera, The Magic Flute, because there's a lot of symbolism in there we'll talk about tonight, which is also fun because, how the universe lines everything up. After I did my first Masonic research paper, yes, of course, it was actually playing about a month later near where I live, so I was able to go see it with a fresh set of eyes and point out the little things that probably most of the audience didn't even know about. So that was fun. Always do that. Nice. Okay, so let's...
And in preparation,
Yeah.
before we do that, let's give a shout out to, speaking of music, give a
Music?
shout out to the hats we're wearing. We're all wearing, well, RJ doesn't have his hat on, but yeah, we're shouting out to the Grand Lodge of Texas that's having
Woo.
their week-long Masonic Palooza this week, the Grand
Annual
Annual-
Communication?
Shindigs. And I'm seeing pictures of
Oh.
cigars and barbecue. And,
That's why my feed is full
Magic.
of all that. Yeah.
yeah.
I
don't
was
do
really
that.
confused there. I was really confused because we were talking about music, and then you brought up the Grand Lodge of Texas, and I was like, that.
I
It
just saw
doesn't
the
go.
hats.
One and
and-
the same.
Yeah.
One and the
Right,
same.
Oh.
right here.
Well, usually you think about
Okay.
those two together. Yeah. Especially
Well, no,
in the
you're not
Masonic
supposed- I mean, no,
in a Masonic
there's no-
context.
there's no music in Masonry.
Right.
Sorry.
It's,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
right. I thought that was skulls.
Right.
Anywho, tangent.
No skulls nor music in the Grand Lodge of
Snap that
I mean
rubber band.
Masonry. So let's talk about Brother Mozart then, who was not a Texan, but in fact, let's say Jason did a little bit of research on the historical side, but he couldn't join us tonight. Does anyone else want to take the lead on?
I did the historical side.
You did his Masonic history,
Oh, okay.
but do you know when he was born, when he died, all that good stuff?
No.
Okay, then let me take the lead on that. So,
Alrighty.
brother Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, under many names, was born 27th of January, coming up soon, happy birthday, 1756, and died at the ripe old age of 35, around the 5th of December, 1791. So, of which, of course, there's always a controversy when you die young like that. But we all know him as the boy genius. Always had an ear for music, at the least of which because his father, Leopold Mozart, was a composer, did teach music to people. So, it's kind of like they always say, when you're born into a musical family, you're bound to pick some things up. But sure enough, like at the age of 5, started actually composing his own music. So he was not only between the ages of 3 and 5 just starting to pick out major thirds on the piano. His father was like, wait a minute, you have an ear for this. Actually started to teach him some things, and next thing you know, he's composing music by 5. He's like creating symphonies by 8. So this kid is a wonder kid, which instantly brought him to fame and fortune, right? We'll get to the fortune part.
Was he a real genius?
Ooh, that's the big question, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, so I mean, spoiler, I don't think so, but we'll get.
Would you
to
say
it.
he's more savant-like then?
Nope.
All right,
I don't think he's.
let's get right to
I
the
don't think he's
punchline.
any different. I don't think he's any different than anybody else who would have put in 3,500 hours.
Oh, you're one
practice.
of those. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did. So if you take the same amount of time that he was practicing
True.
and gave it to anybody at that age, of any age, and you compared them, then you get a true sense of the genius. And really what it boils down to is if you do that and you realize that he really wasn't famous, nothing he ever composed until he was 21 years old was considered amazing.
True.
Then what you have now is a case of not extraordinary
Talent, right?
talent, extraordinary upbringing.
Right. Determination,
His dad-
consistency, right.
Interesting.
Yeah, his dad was like, his dad wrote a violin book
Mm-hmm.
that was considered like the standard for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Made his son, I mean, his dad was Leopold. His dad was teaching him music and music theory at 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was 3 years old, I was pooping my pants. So,
Ditto.
I mean, that's what's, I mean, but it is truly extraordinary because not everybody has that, that amazing kind of gift of the family, right?
Extraordinary
I mean-
circumstances, not extraordinary talent per se.
And I mean, truly, I think there is some extraordinary things behind Mozart, but I don't think it's his ability to do the things. I think it's his ability to be dedicated to the things. But yeah,
What about the
this
time
guy?
to devote to the things? You know what I mean? It's not like
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
he was making shoes during the day and secretly composing
That's
at
right.
night. He was, you know, he was well off. So you know,
Yeah, and the kid goes on a tour,
A European
right,
tour,
with his
right.
dad.
Mm-hmm.
He does a European tour at like 6 years old or something that
Right.
lasts 3 years. And then right after that, his dad's like, oh, by the way, we're not going home.
What?
We're going to Italy.
Crap.
Pack your bags. And then they do a 5-year tour of Italy. So
Yeah.
he like doesn't come home till he's almost 14 years
Really
old.
doesn't grow up. I mean, think about it, right? He's like
Never.
the
It's
like-
the young, child actor syndrome.
it's like
but he's,
Miley Cyrus.
there you go.
Miley Cyrus.
You gotta
Mozart,
perform.
Miley Cyrus. End of show.
There's the connection.
Yeah, probably.
Robert's like, what?
But
Well,
that does
you
have to
know,
be
they
a
both-
stressful life. I mean, seriously.
They both walked a rugged road.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about a lot of the hotels and things that they stayed in were terrible. Medicine was terrible. They were always sick on the road.
Right.
And this is the 1700s, 18th century. Like medicine is kind of around, but it's not great. Access to medicine is not great. And then what? When he's 17, he gets a commission. He gets employed
Right.
as a court musician, and great, but the money sucks and he's bored.
Yep.
So then he moves to the capital of Austria and takes on the world.
And gets bored there. Right.
Yeah.
That's the sad part too, because he's becoming a man, trying to make his own way in life, and really, I mean, it just sounds like just throughout his life, he's always trying to catch that next thing.
That's extraordinary too, because that idea of trying to catch the next best thing is, like, in my mind, analogous to reaching, continuing to reach. And when you listen to his music, and if you listen to some commentaries on his music, as I was doing in prep for tonight's show, I said, what do experts have to say about Mozart's music? Because everybody thinks they're familiar with Mozart, but they're also kind of familiar with Beethoven, they're kind of familiar with Bach, and certainly they say, well, Beethoven, probably the best composer of all time, seconded by Bach. And then they're like, and Mozart, who is this genius, which I think is appropriate to say. I just wouldn't call him a child genius, but they talk about when they listen to his music, you can hear this kind of reach for the stars, if you will. And sure enough, when they say that and you listen to it, there's kind of like these builds and these echoey, I don't know what you call it, like the hall is echoing, right? And the notes are like tinkling upward.
Yeah, they hang on. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like, all you can do is go, wow, this is stargazing music. This is introspective music. And it is pretty fantastic. So you see that there too, right? Like this, maybe that echoed something in his own life. He's echoing this into the music that he's writing.
I like it. Hey, you said something super interesting about how, everybody thinks they know a little bit of Mozart and a little bit of Beethoven. I can't speak for younger folk, but where did our generation and the generation before us, where did they learn it? Freaking Looney Tunes, man. That's where you learned all. That's where
classical music.
All your classical music.
Yeah.
Mozart, Beethoven, Bach. It was all in Bugs Bunny cartoons. That we grew up on, and those are the songs that bring us back to that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's Beethoven. It's not because the bulk of us actually listen to all of Beethoven's symphonies.
It's really silly too, because we think like this is a guy whose works span are so expansive that they said if you put them all and you categorized them correctly, it would take 15,000 pages. Like, holy cow, right? By the time this guy's 35 years old, this super serious guy whom we know through cartoons. There's something amazing about that. I mean, that's kind of what opened up the door to music without lyrics for me, right? Like I listened to that and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, what's that? And then my grandpa, he's like, oh, that's Count Basie. And I'm like, what? And then you start getting into like all the jazz and all the cool stuff. It was really kind of a door breaker for a lot of people too, I think, when you think about your exposure to those types of music, right?
That's true. So one thing that I found interesting in my research from years ago, looking into his life too, was like, okay, what's this Masonic influence? Remember, he's born in 1756, right? So think about right about the time George Washington's getting his Master Mason degree, and then we're coming up close to he's in his 20s when America is being born, right? So just to kind of give some historical context and anchoring. So we know that the Grand Lodge of England is active in 1717 and beyond, right? And the other Grand Lodges nearby, obviously, Grand Lodge of Paris is not far behind, and we've talked about Paris and the French Revolution and maybe the Masonic connection there. So there's definitely a lot of Masonry going on around in Europe. It's still in its infancy. It's not maybe 100 years old, organized yet. But obviously this is where you want to go and hang out. This is the people you want to be with. And so that even before Mozart was a Freemason, he was hanging around other brother Freemasons. And we know that to be true because of how he's getting his work commissioned. Specifically, there's a couple other ones here. Later travels brought him to European Dr. Anton Mesmer, who commissioned him to work on a piece of work called Bastion and Bastion. In 1778, at the age of 22, Mozart met brother Baron von Gemmingen, a diplomat from Mannheim. Yeah, Robert?
You mentioned Mesmer. Now, is this the same as in the namesake of?
I think it is.
Mesmerizing, the hypnotist?
Yeah, and the animal magnetism guy. Yep.
Wild.
Yeah, the one and the same. And again, we have a brother Gemmingen who commissioned a work called, Semiramis, based on Masonic principles. And they became like best friends, but Gemmingen was a Mason before Mozart, and they kind of, chummed it up. And then Gemmingen left Mannheim for Vienna in 1782 and ended up becoming this little thing called the Grand Master of the Viennese Masonic Lodge called Beneficence, which will have an interesting connection here in a little bit. So, you got a friend who's giving you work. You learn about the Masons, and the next thing you know, this friend who helped you out early in your life just happens to be a Grand Master, right? So let's. There's a couple others that I'll get to later, but that kind of leads us into what is this Masonic bibliography of Mozart. Joe, take it away.
Yeah, right. So just to add some color to what you were talking about, this is the beginnings of speculative Freemasonry. And Freemasonry in Austria, the first lodge in Vienna was in 1742. Okay, so that's 20 years after the premier Grand Lodge of England was formed. So not that long after. So, these are fledgling lodges when it comes to it. But in terms of just a baby. But in terms of Mozart's Masonic resume, the earliest records show that he was admitted as an apprentice in December of 1784 in the lodge. I cannot say it in Austrian, but its English name is Beneficence. And then he became a fellow of the craft in January of 1785, so about a month later. And then shortly thereafter, there's no dates, he became a Master Mason. So again, this is after 1725. We do have a 3-degree system. And yeah.
Right. I do know that I think there is a record of him being a Mason by April of 1785. So while we don't have his actual record of becoming a Master Mason, we have him, at least some Masonic record that shows he went to lodge or something around April 1785 as a Master Mason. Mm-hmm.
Right on. So there are records showing that Mozart attended meetings of other lodges. One was called True Concord Lodge. Again, I cannot pronounce the Austrian. And this lodge was, quote unquote, the biggest, the most biggest, the Donald Trumpist and most aristocratic in Vienna. Mm-hmm. And Mozart was known as one of the best musical Masons in that area. So because of his hard work in music, I'm not going to say talent because Robert will throw stuff at me from his chair that's still messy.
I got lots of stuff I can throw.
God, I'm coming over tomorrow. Everybody wanted to hear him play. So, he would travel from lodge to lodge. He was the traveling man,
yes.
And he was young when it came to it. So about a year later, in December 1785, his own lodge, Beneficence, was merged with 2 other lodges under more of a governmental reform in Freemasonry. Okay. And this lodge became known as Lodge New Crowned Hope. Oh, and so again, just a year after he was became an entered apprentice, his lodge and 2 other lodges merged together. And then somebody noted on Sun Card says in a Clan D lodge. No, there's no such thing back then.
That's right.
But somebody mentioned that his father Leopold was a Freemason, but it looks like based on the dates that Leopold became a Freemason after Wolfgang did.
Same year,
so,
but just later. Mm-hmm.
Yep,
so I'm gonna assume that it was a reverse Lewis situation where he's like, "Hey, I'm a Mason. You know all these guys. Why don't you come on over and I'll raise you," or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Which you see, which is cool. You see it nowadays.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
Was interesting, Joe. You had mentioned that he was considered to be amongst the better musically talented Masons, and I'm like, who's gonna be better?
Yeah. Name one. Wait.
Anybody? Yeah. But yeah,
it's not like it is 1785. It's not like you've got a bunch of disco stews running around Vienna,
right.
Doing their thing and little pop-up DJ booths. But yeah, to that point, disco stew. I love disco stew. But I think that was it on his Masonic. I don't have all of his awards and all of his lapel pins.
Sure.
I have none of that. They were very hoity-toity.
But what side appended bodies did he join? Was he a member? Was he a Shriner?
None.
one
he a
lapel
Shriner?
pin per coat back then. Okay.
Yeah. Was not a Shriner.
I'm going to look, and I'll post it in the show notes for this on Facebook. But I'm really curious in the time frame of this, being over there in kind of the Deutschland area, if any of his lodges were affected by the Memphis rite.
Ooh.
And I'm
That would
curious,
be
right?
interesting.
Like, because Beneficence Lodge sounds like one of those lodges.
So, to your point, there definitely was. All right, now we're talking about the time frames where the Bavarian Illuminati was
True.
also around. So,
Right.
there definitely was, and I was reading some other stuff preparing for this episode where there definitely was some commingling between Bavarian Illuminati members and Masonic lodges in Vienna. That absolutely did happen. There's a couple of names that were mentioned: Otto Erich Deutsch and Ignaz von Born. That were part of a naturalist movement, part of a humanist movement, things like that. But there were little spider webs between Masonic lodges and Illuminati lodges as well.
I think one thing that we can just probably jump into, if you guys don't mind, is probably the elephant in the room, which is the magic flute.
Nice. Let's do it.
And one of the things about the magic flute, going back to what Joe was saying, you were just mentioning this idea of humanism and things, and this was the prominent, like everything about Freemasonry that the esotericist loves today is actually being pulled from an era of Freemasonry that's pretty small,
Right.
that basically was influenced by Renaissance and Enlightenment and humanist ideals.
Right. Let me set the stage for that conversation, because this is yet another influence of Masonry weaving into his life. Because in early 1791, a longtime friend and known brother, Johann Schikaneder, who was very popular at the time, he was a very popular operatic singer, performer. He suggested that he and Mozart create something unique, like this big show, right? And it will be performed at Schikaneder's theater, right? He's got his own theater. He's big enough name to have his own theater. He says, hey, why don't you and I work together? We're Masonic buddies. I'm popular, you're poor. He didn't really say it that way, but the elephant was in the room. And
He might have.
yeah, I mean, basically, it's believed that Brother Schikaneder gave Mozart this work as kind of like a brother helping brother. Like, let me give you, I know you're having financial difficulties, so let me help you out. So the Magic Flute premiered September 30th, 1791, and was a smashing success because they set all the cards up right. That, well-known performer, well-known artist at this time. So that's really how they came up with this concept of the Magic Flute. And to your point, RJ, like, why not just put the icing on the cake and make this thing the like Masonic play of its time? So back to you, RJ.
It just goes to say, like, it might be the most Masonic play ever. Not for its ability to, what you're picking out of it, but because of the way it was done. Not only just kind of has these subtle allusions to that, I think any Mason watching would be like, oh, cool. I mean, there's a number of, like, a lot of stuff has threes.
Yeah.
Mozart has the three doors, the three ladies, the three knocks, the three opening notes that are in triplets.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every single piece of this, I mean, it is absolutely ingrained into it. But just the whole idea, the initiation into it, when the lead character discovers that the Queen of the Night is not about, like, she's not good.
Yeah.
She wants to envelop the world in night, right? And
darkness.
Then there's like this, and then there's the Sons of Light,
Right, the temple,
and
the Sun
all of these
Temple.
things. Yeah. So there's all these little ideas. And then, in fact, there's been even some debate that probably led to the play's success, that the Queen of the Night is based on the Holy Roman Empress who denounced Freemasonry. So there's this idea, like, it's also a little bit of, you know, a social commentary
A little
as well.
poking the bear, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
so
I mean, it's a huge.
Brilliant.
Sorry to jump in there, but it's.
No, good.
I don't think it's a little, and I don't think it's veiled. I mean, it's, you know, multiple people that have written about the magic flute all say the Queen of the Night was absolutely
Right.
the Austrian Empress, right? And she symbolized oppression,
Right.
and that what's his name? The High Priest. He represented. I mentioned the name before, Ignaz von Born, who was basically like the Enlightenment Freemason, you know, in that area. But all those themes, they weren't subtle, right? We talked about the sun conquering the moon.
Right.
We talked about the, you know, Tamino, the main character, actually goes through an initiation, right? Trying to
In
find
the second act.
the daughter of the princess. Absolutely.
Right.
You know, it gets alchemical. You've got fire and water symbolism in it. I mean, it is mind blowing. If I didn't have a hat on right now, you'd see a atomic bomb go off. It is crazy. If you've not watched it.
And the princess that he rescues is the daughter of the Queen of the Night. Right? So here, like, is even further kind of allusions to drawing the good out of the darkness kind of thing, like, and then absorbing it, and kind of, there's alchemical equilibrium stuff all over this thing. And
purification.
The
hero's
kind of
journey, going through the
esoteric-
trials, right?
Yeah, it's like I said, it is the esoteric Mason's cream dream. It's just even today, nothing hits that mark. And really the interesting thing about it is, like, those Masonic pieces of the play, all of the symbolic, esoteric natures of it, cannot be like thrown away. Experts, there are TED Talks about the Masonic influences of the magic flute.
Right. I'm trying to look at some of my other notes here. I mean, just to double down on what you guys have said. 2-act play, right? The first act is at night, and then the second act is at the Temple of the Sun. Right. He goes through at least 2 trials, fire and water. There might be some others that are implied or added in other versions of the story. I'm glad you brought up the opening of those 2 acts has 3 sets of 3 notes, just like you would open Lodge with those raps. A majority of the opera is in the key of E flat, which itself has 3 flats. I haven't really checked, but there's been some writers that have said that when he would write for an Entered Apprentice song, it would have 1 flat. When he'd write for Fellowcraft, it would be 2 flats, and then would write for Master Mason, it'd be 3 flats. I can't verify that, but I'm sure some musicians out there is going to go check. And yeah, we talked about the Queen of the Night. Yeah, it's just, I think we covered all this because it's just fascinating that all the stuff was so in your face about it that actually there was rumors to be cause of suspicion for some foul play that possibly Brother Mozart gave away too much. Because not long after he released this, so we have the premiere on September 30th, 1791. By December, 66 days after the premiere, Mozart succumbed to a, quote, severe miliary fever, right? 2 months after his premiere, boom, he's dead.
And miliary fever is essentially any kind of viral infection that causes a fever. There's it's not specific at all.
Right.
It's highly debated today with all of the symptoms that he had. Nobody knows what it is. They talked about poisoning of either being mercury, which largely was just being used for syphilis back then. And then the other was arsenic. But arsenic doesn't create the kind of swelling that they said he had. 15 days in bed. Oh, man. 66. It's a double 33. 15 days in bed, 15 steps. I smell a conspiracy. They said that he was so swollen. They said he was so swollen he couldn't move any appendages. Like, just imagine, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, but it's, it's the Stay Puft 35-year-old Mozart. This guy's younger than all of us.
Yeah. Dead.
Dead.
Yep.
So it's led to what? They think kidney failure, to retention of fluids and all of these other things. But the doctors have gone over everything, and the jury's still out. It makes you wonder.
Yeah, we know he was working on his famous Requiem that he never finished, the unfinished opera, which became a great piece when it was finished and a big MacGuffin throughout the movie Amadeus. But the actual final piece that he did complete before his death was the Little Masonic Cantata. So he was still writing Masonic music after the Magic Flute, and finished that before he went on. So it's just fascinating to see that he was starting to weave his talent for music and his Masonic connections together, even to the very end.
It was kind of crazy because as I was doing some of the research for tonight's episode, I really didn't. He starts off as Joe, and you kind of guys alluded to this affluent sort of upbringing, and after he does all these things, he's kind of got like that poor musician's life going on. Like, he makes most of his money touring and playing shows, holding dinner parties where people pay him to play music, or as you guys said, taking on commissions. And I just can't imagine that kind of lifestyle and trying to uphold this, epic image of you are famous while you're living. That's a rarity, especially in the artistic world
and pre-internet.
And you have to uphold this image of
you can't just download his track from SoundCloud, right? You've got to be there.
Yeah. And what is Mozart supposed to show up in rags and to play your party? No, he has a visage to make sure that he upkeeps for the public, so that they know he's the great Mozart.
Right.
And that had to have been incredibly difficult. So I wonder, did he turn to Freemasonry at any point because it was like aid, or did he start creating more Masonic music to sell to lodges? It is fulfilling a need, but maybe we'll never know.
Comment on that. So, having seen the Magic Flute, it's been a little bit. I actually want to watch it again now. I get the sense watching it and knowing how the story plays out that Mozart really did get the more symbolic aspects of it. He wasn't just blowing smoke out of his butt to get paid. You know what I mean? Like, he understood the essence of the symbolism, and when you watch it, and when you listen to it, and when you extract the meaning from it. So, to your point, when you were talking, I was thinking, I'm like, well, was he going to lodges to find patrons? Because that's what you did as a musician, right? You found patrons to take care of you and stuff like that. But then I listened to the Magic Flute, and I'm like, well, shoot, he gets it. He understood, and at least I think he understood, and shit's beautiful, Sorry for the potty mouth.
That's okay. I said something earlier I shouldn't have said. But yeah, I agree. It's
going downhill.
Through that lens of knowing and thinking about how he interpreted those signs and symbols, and the philosophy behind things, and how he basically created a Masonic drama for the public.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It kind of reminds you of, Cops or something, where they're like, the names of the innocent have been changed.
Yeah. Everything's the
he-
same.
he
Just
take-
change. Just change
Just,
the
it's a
a
lift
couple
and
words
shift.
around. Yeah.
And it is beautiful music and a real piece of artwork.
So yeah, he didn't stop there though. He since 1772 he was producing Masonic music on the regular. Which you can search these up and find most of these. But what I find interesting is he had specific usages for specific ones. So I have a couple of different CDs, and yes, I've put them on streaming as well, of different groupings of his Masonic music. So you should definitely listen to those. But it also helps to know the context, because once you translate them, there's titles such as "O Sacred Bond of Friendship Between True Brothers." There's ones for use at the installation of a new journeyman, fellowcraft, right? There's the Mason's Joy. There's a couple that were written for actual Masonic funerals. So if you're looking for something to add to your own Masonic funeral list, there you go. You got some music written by Brother Mozart that you can use for that. What else? We have Colony of the Friends of Nature for the close of the lodge, intended to be a lodge closing song. So, again, it's not like he just was inspired by Masonry. Like, no, he was like, I want to write these for use at lodge. Like all music should be used in ritual, in lodge settings, in no matter what Grand Lodge you're a member of. Like, Masonic music should be something to be admired, inspired by something of our brothers of the past.
Well, let's pull that thread a little bit. I mean, what was, they were playing, lodges were playing, before Mozart came along, they were playing music in lodges, right? How many old lodges are there in Europe that have these grand organs and things like that? That stuff was there before Mozart came on the scene.
Right.
But what was Masonic music like before Mozart came along? Did they just play crappy other songs from, like, what they did?
Many of the time, we have evidence that shows processional music happening, a lodge musician, a celloist perhaps. Think now of your, let's take it all the way down to like the journeyman's, layman's, like pub lodge. We're talking about maybe a collection, like when they're gathering, maybe they don't do the purge and they don't do all the things that we do today, but think about them on the working floor, and maybe there's a fiddler and he's just kind of playing something along to keep it nice before the meeting, because that was really one of the key forms of entertainment that was easily accessible if you had a lodge musician,
right.
And that was
with a singer.
And it was probably so well taken by the brethren for a number of reasons.
Right.
Well, now let's fast forward 300 years to what do we have now? We have a bunch of people singing one song out of tune,
with the piano if they're lucky.
Or their iPod playing, the iPod that the lodges had for 20 years, the funeral ode, or they don't get to listen to music at all. Weird.
Yeah.
In all this talk about Mozart and his music is one of the 7 liberal arts and sciences that we tout to adore and speak to. So lodge without music sounds weird to me.
Does sound very
yeah.
It does. It just sounds weird.
It does sound weird.
That's me though. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
I was done. I don't know why you're staring at me.
So
I just want to smile until my eyes shut like Mr. Magoo.
So that's pretty much it. That's the history, the brief bio, the Masonic bio, and a little bit of his Masonic symbolism throughout his his artwork.
But
so
wait,
there's
I
more.
have a question. Maybe John or Joe, maybe one of you picked this up. You talked about funeral music, and then I was like, wait a minute, Mozart was a bro. Did he have a Masonic burial? So I'm just curious.
Ooh, John.
I believe he
Tell
did
us.
not. I believe he, of course, there is the myth, not to be proven not true, that he was just buried in a mass pauper's grave, that he was just piled in,
yeah.
dumped in. Because that's how they end the
They
movie
s-
Amadeus.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Amadeus is not factual, right? But it's like the conspiracy that the dude wanted the greatness but could never achieve the greatness of
Right. It
Mozart.
makes for good storytelling, but not actually
Yeah,
true.
and then we've got they say that he died like kind of poor, so yeah, he was buried in a regular old grave.
So that was the difference, right? Because it was a pauper's grave, but that was just kind of like there's only like two kinds of graves: pauper's graves and then the aristocratic graves, right? And the only difference really was after 10 years they were going to dig you up and use that plot of land for the next body to come in. If you were in a pauper's grave, if you were in the aristocracy, then your body is good and firm and planted there. So that really is the nomenclature difference, right? So when, it was not a mass grave, it was not an unmarked grave.
So do
But
you think then, John, there's a possibility that Mozart was just dug up and tossed aside?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, it
Wow.
just yeah. So his body could have been moved anywhere since then, right? So, right, do we know his final resting
Well, I mean, there. I mean, if you look,
place is? I don't know.
they did erect a monument to him at St. Mark's Cemetery, where they believe he was buried. Not definitely not in a coffin.
Right.
You know, so that part they're pretty sure on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but was it like one of those big pile dead body graves? Probably not. But to
Probably
your
not
point,
either.
St. Mark's Cemetery was not the hoity-toity cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
They did erect a monument to him, but is his body underneath it? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty swollen, so I'm just thinking he's probably like a giant Sazeets. They just probably were like, careful, toss that cased meat into the ground.
Yeah.
A big calzone.
Don't poke it with the
So
stick.
fluffy.
Yeah. Ugh. That's disgusting.
Like you poke it and it just starts like whistling, like da, 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 da.
And Bugs Bunny
Holy
pops
God!
out.
You guys are sick. I swear.
Killed a rabbit. Sorry.
On that note, let's give him the respect he deserves and wrap things up for final thoughts. And we'll start with RJ
Every damn time.
to make Joe ticked off. RJ, any final thoughts on brother Wolfgang Mozart? Was he a true genius or just someone who did the work?
I think he did the work, but I think that's what makes a genius, is somebody who understands things. It's like
Agreed.
today's SME, but like a subject matter expert who can live inside and outside of the thing that they're into, right? Like if I pick up my guitar and I want to play a mode like Locrian, Dorian, or something like that, I need to know how those patterns interact on the guitar in order to go wherever I want. But there's a difference between knowing that and just like knowing exactly where that is and what notes go together intrinsically, because you've practiced it so much that you truly know it. And I think that's what he did. Like he knew his art form so well that he was able to compose things. You know, I heard one story. They said they were like, "Oh, I need to write this concerto by next Thursday," and he would do it. And it takes a genius to do that. Somebody who is truly remarkable in their trade craft. So, yeah, really awesome. I learned so much about Mozart just in prep for this week and listening to you guys. I walk away from this week's episode with a whole new appreciation. So I hope everybody out there who's listening, I hope we did him somewhat justice, as John put it, kind of an abbreviated Masonic bio, and a little bit of talk about his life. Really fun. So thank you.
Agreed. All right, Joe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm going to focus mostly on the magic flute and realize that I need to go watch it again. And in fact, as I was while you were talking, I was looking up. I'm like, where can I watch it again? Because I remember I watched it. There was a more recent version of it that's in English that was actually pretty awesome. And yeah, so I feel like I need to go watch it again and really start to unpack some of that symbolism. Because at the end of the day, to Robert's point, he was a genius who did the work, and that's what made him amazing, and that's what made him memorable, and that's why we still talk about him 250 years later. And I think that he was able to tell a story that encapsulates, like Robert said, in a very small slice of, you know, what we like to pull out of as us symbolic Masons. Out of a very brief period of time, he was able to give us so much amazing content and story and something to hold on to and help tell our story. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. So, you know, even with the fun little jokes aside, I mean, he was an amazing man and he was a brother. And, you know, he's inspired me to take his work a bit more seriously. And I'm definitely going to watch the Magic Flute again and, you know, unpack it some more. So kudos, Brother Wolfgang. And yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, if you look on YouTube, there's a couple of different editions. In fact, I did see there was a more modern one where like he crash lands his spaceship, and that's how he like starts the beginning of the first act. It's out there. It's entertaining. I wouldn't say it's the best one out there, but if you want something to keep you entertained, because you know we all have short attention spans. But there you go. So Hollywood needs to remake the Magic Flute. I'm sure they'd ruin it, but.
Oh, and before you sign off, tell people no teeny bopper treasure tonight.
We are not doing Unlocking the Treasure. We're going to hold that off when Jason comes back. We'll do 2 episodes next week, cover 2 episodes of the Disney thriller. It's
More
not that bad.
Teenagers making out.
I'm enjoying it more than you guys are, but that's not saying much.
I don't know. I like it, John. We can watch it together. It's okay.
Good. We'll do a cast party, pop some popcorn. All right, make it happen. This is fun. Again, I think there's a lot to say about these men over our past, our brothers who we revere. We also give them a little bit of hero status, just like we do with George Washington. You have these guys who grew up in the era of Masonic Enlightenment. And we tend to hold them at a higher pedestal. But at the end of the day, they were just men. They had their faults. They had talents, but they also had their own struggles as well. And so I think we've kind of captured a lot of those themes throughout his music and his aspirations for both him and the fraternity. And that's what it's all about. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for watching and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.